Welcome, everybody. I'm super excited today to launch our new podcast called Skills Quotient. And for our very first meeting today, we're going to introduce Nhu, who, she'll introduce herself a little bit later, but we're very excited to have her here to talk a little bit more about design thinking, how that works with her clients, how she's thinking about the future, AI, and many other exciting topics. Nhu, we've known each other, I don't know, it's been like 3 years, 4 years?
No,
More than that? 5 years?
much more
All right.
than that.
We've known each other for many years. Okay. I realized that I don't know your background very, very well. I mean, I know, you worked at Apollo and did marketing and things like that, but I think for folks here, it'd be interesting, and even for, young ladies who are watching who aspire to have a successful career like you, or pretty much any young person really, what makes you you? How did you become the Nhu of today?
Thank you for the question. Wow, there's a lot of reflection back, but right now I'm the founder of Doodle Design and Doodle A, and we are a design thinking-led innovation firm and training as well. We provide training solutions to corporate and team members. But reflecting back to my journey, I actually came from marketing and research background. And I did that for the whole of my career before I started Doodle A and Doodle Design. And like you mentioned, I used to work for education sector as well. Probably more of my research and marketing side more enhanced during that experience. Sure. But I love marketing, always love marketing and research and understand people's need and satisfy a lot of commercial goals and objectives and KPIs and all that. And one pivotal moment was when a friend of ours mentioned about human-centered design from Luma Institute out of Pittsburgh, US. And we were so curious what that was. And we came to Singapore and Australia to learn more about this framework and never looked back ever since. Fell in love with it, use it, try it, open a firm and help organizations and people to use it heavily to make experience, to make life better every day. So the pivotal moment for me when I try and use design thinking was, actually this is a funny one, was where's the report? When I used the marketing and market research and all that, like we did a lot of report, insight and recommendations, slides after slide. But here, there's none. So there's always practical, experimental, and we are required to be on the field a lot. Be in the front of the customers,
For sure.
Observe, like fly on the wall and write down, journaling, and draft on the ideas through visuals and all that, and testing a lot. So always be in the front of the customers, and then we realized that what you understand is not at the end, but what are you gonna do with the insights and the understanding and knowledge to transfer that to impactful actions. So design thinking is all about actions. So as I mentioned, you in the field, you sweat yourself, you try, you error, and do it again. So very actionable framework, very human-centric. At the end of the day, if you don't make the life of the people better, then that's not design thinking. That's right? True. And it's extremely collaborative. You engage multiple stakeholders internally and externally to gather different wisdom perspectives to apply design thinking. So that's a little bit of my journey. When we were traveling in Argentina, we were on the top of the mountain, and we realized we need to create a firm that help people be better innovators. And that's how Doodle was created, because as you can tell, it's all about doodling and visualizing and sketching your ideas and try different versions of ideas Yeah, that's a little bit longer version.
No, but that's great. I think
Where
that's
am
very
I
helpful.
right now?
No,
But
I think
by the
that's
way,
very-
I'm also a mom of a 6 years old, and I love sports and travels and on that. So a little bit more of the soft side.
Yeah, for sure. But actually, I'm even curious to go even deeper in some ways because you mentioned that you grew up, you love marketing, you like solving problems, understanding psychology, and so on. Where did that come from? Growing up when you were a little girl, why do you think later on that was something that interested you?
Wow, it's very big questions and very good questions. I wonder if it's nurtured or is born with it or is from life experience. And I love to say it's a bit of many things. A
That's
bit of many
complicated,
things.
sure.
Yeah. So you're born with the right mindset, brought by probably my mom trying to encourage me to be very independent. And to self-learn and self-study, and I always love learning, and also be very curious. I'm a genuine curious kind of person from day one, maybe from I was little. So you're born with it, and you nurture with the environment and the family. But also the major impact of my career life was by the people that I work with. And I'm very fortunate to work with people who understand my strength and my weakness, coach me and guide me to the right directions, and spend one-on-one time with me, like you, Cedric.
Yeah, sure. You do a lot of
So
one-on-ones.
much. I'm very thankful for our time together. But the people that I'm surrounded with, that make who I am, form who I am right now, and just the spirit of trying to be a better version of myself every day, and be curious, continuous, lifelong learning, improvement. I guess a little bit of the mindset, the spirit, the behaviors, but also nurtured by the environment that I allow myself to be surrounded with.
And so I'm sure you get this question a lot, and even we've known each other for a long time. And I even, you've asked me to join in some of your marketing materials, but
True, yeah.
I think one of the questions that many people want to know is, what is design thinking really? I think a lot of people have some concept of what it is, but they're never it's not very clear in their minds. So maybe can you just share a little bit more about, your views on what design thinking is, and how you guys are thinking about that at Doodle?
Yeah, I hope I get better explaining it every single time, and I hope I crack the concept of it. But design thinking is not much to do with thinking, but a lot of doing and sweating during the process. But in short, imagine you have an idea, and human nature, you have an idea, you have a problem, you jump from a problem to solutions. But design thinking is the whole process in the middle. So you start with listening, understand, and then imagine the idea, and you create some sort of trial versions. You test, you improve again, and you repeat the process. So that's the whole concept of design thinking. But in short, you put the people at the heart of the whole process to make the problems better and to create a better experience for the people who enjoy the experience. I hope it creates a little bit more explanation for you. Yeah.
Can you perhaps give us some examples of maybe what other companies are doing to apply design thinking?
Okay, so there's many applications and case study on design thinking, but I'm going to use very familiar example from a very well-known brand, Airbnb. So I guess everybody knows Airbnb. So when it first started, initial early days, they found out the bookings are very close. Like very low, very low bookings rate. And instead of jumping to assumptions and solutions, how to fix the low booking rates, the founders actually try to fly in, to stay with the host and experience it, to find out the problems. And they found out that the problems actually are caused by the, the low quality images of the, the host accommodations in the hotels. So since then, they realized that they need to support the host to create better images and better, photo and booking experience. And that's how they create prototype testing, give support to the host and change the whole experience to make the bookings rate go up higher. In Vietnam, Techcombank, one of our key clients, applying design thinking throughout the whole culture, from leadership to teams to executions to the whole transformations, and they use it for improving, testing different features on our everyday fingertips, on our app experience, banking experience, and that's one of the core project that we have been working with for many years in these transformations.
Okay. Yeah. Exciting, and I guess that's a very good example. Airbnb, very famous. You're right. I think I studied this case in university where, in fact, they realized that they needed better photos, so actually they then hired professional photographers to do the photography because they realized that, you're right, people were not booking. So I guess let's kind of shift gears a little bit. How are you guys, or how has design thinking been implemented in Vietnam over the last few years? How has that changed? How are companies thinking about it differently? What's your take on that?
Sure. When we first started, probably more than 5 years ago, and everyone was like, you're very bold. What is design thinking? And what is design? And all of that. And they thought it's graphic design, visual design, all the creative design. And we actually took the plunge to really embrace it and bring the awareness of design thinking to every single levels of the organizations with better education, better showcase of, the benefits and the impact of design thinking. So past 5 years later, we actually realized that design thinking awareness has tremendously increased a lot. From not only corporate or tech-heavy corporations, but every other industries like educations, retails, F&B and all that. So the awareness has increased a lot, and the desire to learn and to apply design thinking has also increased a lot, especially on the leadership level. So that's a very good news. I think another realization is I hope in the next, this year and the next 3 years, companies will truly embrace it, because design thinking is not only about thinking about it, not only about theory, what it is, and then training from classroom to classroom, but actually sweating profoundly, apply it, and a lot of trial and error, and do it better, do it again and again, and it's a non-linear process. So that's what we hope for in the next phase of truly integrations of the mindset, the methods, and the belief in the impact of design thinking into every levels of the organizations.
I'm very curious because the whole design thinking process is a very iterative process, right? And I'm wondering, how does that complement or is affected by the way that Vietnamese education, Vietnamese kind of culture is set up? How does that work?
Very, very good questions, a very interesting question. Let me start first with the key mindsets and behaviors when you actually apply design thinking in everyday work or life. And there are 6 key behaviors. First one is being imaginative. So you think in a normal language, you say think out of the box, or think like there's no box. Second is being visual. A picture paints 1,000 words. So you kind of write down what you want to explain, what you want to convey through visuals. And third is being collaborative. The power of collective wisdom. Bringing the power of teamwork, brainstorming as you may, ideations from different functions, different teams roles and levels of the organizations. Then you have iterative, as you say. Iterative, actually, we have a Vietnamese poem for it, but I will share later. But in short, it means you do it again, you do it better, and you repeat the process. And it's a very, very key core spirit of design thinking. And through that iterative process, the major spirit is not to be afraid of failure, but you fail with purpose. You fail, you realize why you fail, how you can improve it, and you improve it better and better. That's iterative. Then you have questionings, being questions. Ask the right questions. Why? Why not? Why else? What else? Ask a lot of questions until you understand the true problems, the true insights of the problems. Then you have been, the mindset of being curious, like being observer, going out there, ask all the questions, being the obsessed observer, being the real world, walk into the shoes, the fingertips, the heart and mind of the person who really enjoyed the experience. And I think I came from Vietnamese educational system myself, and I don't think that were taught enough at school. In my old days anyway, I'm not going to give away my age to you if you're questioning that. But nowadays, in international school, it starts to bring in, on those kind of spirit of learning inquiries based. But compared to the past or traditional Vietnamese system, I think it could be much more improved in terms of encouraging the students to ask questions. Prompt on the right questions, being curious, and more practical learning. And like I mentioned, not to be afraid of fail. So if you have an idea, test it, create the idea, test it, and make it better. So practical experiment, if you say.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. So from what you're telling me, it seems that you believe that design thinking and actually Vietnamese culture are quite aligned in some ways. Is that kind of the point that you're trying to get to?
I think Vietnamese are very open-minded and very, a risk taker at heart, if being encouraged. But the school system can be equipped more to bring that potential out a little bit more. And we work with Vietnamese, people or team members, and even, surprisingly, even the finance persons, compliance person, after learning about design thinking, they came out with the most customer-centric suggestions to enhance the whole, CX or customer experience in the organizations. So potentials are there, the mindsets are there. A little bit more training, encouragement, and consistent discipline, I think would bring out the design thinking mindset in the Vietnamese people even more.
Okay, interesting. And so right now, Doodle, let's, I guess, go back to kind of your core business. Would you say that you are more, because you talk a lot about children and young people, but from what I understand, Doodle is more focused on corporates and adults. Plans to focus on children at some point?
Oh yeah, we have we have a couple of what we call social impact projects, and we coach university students from RMIT, from Fulbright, and high schools in Hanoi, Olympia High Schools. So we have experience working with students, probably high school students or university students, but young learners, I guess, it's the most difficult. Can you imagine explaining design thinking to a 7 years old or 10 years old or 11 years old? It's difficult, isn't it? But it's so much needed. I observe how international schools apply the IB, IB philosophy in teaching. It's actually very aligned with design thinking. Problem solving, experimental, inquiries based, and asking all the right questions and being curious. So definitely align in terms of the directions to equip more of this kind of mindset and behaviors of innovators and problem solvers in the young generations. And definitely something that we would be open to do as a next step.
Okay.
I would say, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for the
Exciting.
suggestions.
I mean, maybe new market, who knows?
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
And then, we've known each other for a while now, and we always exchange ideas. We're always talking about the future. And, one of the topics that is very hot right now is the topic of AI, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm very curious, what's your take on AI? How is that going to affect the future of design thinking? How do you think that's going to impact the way that people do their jobs today in the world? Just, your thoughts.
Wow, it's a big question.
It's a big question.
We're not AI expert, so I'm gonna comment that from a person who runs the business and who uses design thinking for clients' projects.
Sure.
We love AI. At first when AI came, we were like, what is it, right? But after using it, applying it, we really love it. And it's actually a very good co-pilot for us, for the whole design thinking process. So to us, initially, it could be a replacement for what we do, but now the more we use it, it's more collaborations and enhancement to our process.
I see.
And it can save us a lot of labor, repetitive tasks, and if you use it strategically, you can mine a lot of different insights, develop a lot of different concepts to test it faster and easier to the end customers. So to us, AI is a very good complementary co-pilot. For us, it's all about human-centric solutions, and we still strongly believe in building a team that is excited for the unknown, for the future, and the team that's ready to fight whatever new wave come in their way. And we believe the mindset, the behaviors of design thinking will equip them for whatever come their way later. So the skills are here to stay, regardless of AI or any other technology enhancement that may develop later. And that design thinking can bring a lot of different skills through the process. And one of the skills we see that will stay and truly complement to AI is the skills of being empathetic to the customer's need, being emotional, heightened to the needs of the customers. Then decision making. So AI bring data and insights, but humans sense making brings stories. And design thinking is a great tool to bring out the stories. So decision making skills and creative problem framing. So AI can help a lot with ideation, brainstorming. You can prompt, you use different tools, and you have a lot of solutions, different versions of testing, prototypes, or whatsoever. But the sense making, the problem framing, like identify the right problems to solve, is here to stay and need to be done in collaborative with the humans, touch, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
So framing the problem is still very crucial. So if, Albert Einstein say, if I have 1 hour, I spend 55 minutes framing the problem, 5 minutes solving the problems. So that framing problem is still remain a crucial part of design thinking, and we still need humans touch for that. But having said that, the teams, if I imagine organizations that apply AI in the process, the teams will move away from on the doing, repeating, doing tasks to more strategic thinking. And reimagines and more strategic level. So it will be a shift of the whole design thinking process for sure, and also the teams, organizations, and structure for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So if I kind of summarize what you've shared, you believe that basically AI and design thinking are not opposites, they actually work well together. You believe that essentially the things that make us human, so our ability to empathize, our ability to be human, will be enhanced further using AI. That's in a nutshell what you're summarizing.
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, I would agree with you. I've been reading a lot of books from Dune. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
And basically, in the Dune universe, Frank Herbert also kind of gets to the point that in the future, it's not so much man or machine taking over, but rather both working well together, and that one doesn't necessarily replace the other. So,
agreed.
With that, where do you think, for yourself, I guess, what does the future of design thinking look like? What are some folks doing today in the field that excite you? And what direction do you think we're headed in?
Wow. I think it's a very exciting era that we live in. And as mentioned, design thinking is a non-linear process. You know, you create ideas, you imagine it, you try, you improve it, and you repeat the process. But with AI, it makes that process a bit more fun, I guess. AI will make that process more fun. You focus on the meaningful one and the one that needs strategic thinking rather than the labor process. You know, imagine you interview people and you go through the data mining and sense making. AI can do the job. You know, UX designer and CX designer create different versions of testing, prototyping. AI can do the job, right? So the whole design thinking process will be a paradigm shift to more data mining, to ideas mining. You find the ideas, you find the stories. And another shift is from customer needs understanding to customer needs anticipations and personalizations. Because data, with all the data connect to each other, you have so many available data and resources. The mining, the understanding, AI can do that. But the AI can also help you with anticipation, the need. And for us as the designers, not graphic designer, but you know, the design thinkers, we're gonna use that for the so what. Now you have the data, you have the story, so what? What are you gonna do with that to create solutions that bring sustainable impact to the people who actually enjoy it? So I would say the future of design thinking is a lot more fun in that way, a lot more strategic in that way. And folks in design thinking area, tech, UX, CX, UI, should start to think about embracing the skills that moving them from specialists to maybe more generalist specialists. You know, they can do different jobs. Product designer, product manager can also reimagine what am I going to be, what my role is going to be in the whole process. So it will be a lot more jobs integration, but also a lot more jobs creations at the same time. So where is our mindset take us? Yeah.
So I guess to kind of re-summarize your point again, we're not going to go towards AI replacing all of us. Actually, you think that the design thinking process will be enhanced from it. And I think one of the things that you said what was interesting was that we will not be short of, like, AI cannot replace the ideation phase, which I think is important because today most AI needs to be prompted, right? You need to request AI to do something. But that initial prompt is still very human in terms of what we wanted to do or the things that we wanted to be able to generate for us. So I think hopefully the future of design thinking is quite safe.
Yeah, I hope so.
And
yes.
I think, you know, for us as a training and education company, I think what's very interesting is that you're right. Hopefully AI will take away a lot of the things that are very manual, that are very annoying for us to do. I even see that today in my job already. I use ChatGPT like everybody else. Simplify my work, but it allows me to focus on things that I find more meaningful and things that I find to be that are higher return on investment, should we say?
For sure, impact.
And out of curiosity, how are you guys thinking of using AI in your design thinking process? And is there a point, do you think, where the design thinking process itself will also change and adapt to modern times? Because design thinking has been around for, actually I don't even know, maybe a couple decades,
yeah,
perhaps. And I guess over time, how has the design thinking process changed? And do you think that this process will continue to change in the world of AI?
Yeah, I think going back to my initial point, design thinking, there's a lot of design doing, sweating, testing, mining for data. Actually, with AI, it could go back to the original concept of design thinking, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So you spend more time on thinking, identify strategic problems, and strategic opportunities and solutions, anticipate the needs. So strategic thinking is here to stay in the process of design thinking. Sorry, the question was about...
what is the future? Do you think that the process is going to change?
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to stay the same as it's been?
Yeah. I haven't thought about the new terms of what's going to be, but I think will be strongly emphasized on the human-centric part. That's for sure. Humans, because ethical human solutions, like you mentioned earlier, you know, or if you use AI, you realize that there's an input and then there's output. So wrong input, maybe wrong output, and then we need humans judging and sense making to identify what information to use, what insights to use, and then therefore develop a sustainable and high impact solutions for the world. So sustainable, responsible usage of AI X design thinking is required for us. It's still very new, and I'm very curious to chat more to people who heavily use design thinking and AI to understand more the challenges, the potentials, opportunities that we can enhance more this great collaboration between AI and human-centric approach. But I foresee that it's going a lot more going back to design thinking truly, strategic thinking. And responsible and sustainable applications of whatever data or insights or stories that we can get from the AIs feeding us. So to create impactful solutions. That's another anticipations. There'll be a lot of personalizations of needs, customers' needs. Like I mentioned, less of understanding but more anticipations. What's next? More the next one. What's next? What does this information give us? What are we going to do about that? The so what, the next step. So there's a lot of anticipations and personalizations. It's very exciting. You know, imagine you shop on Amazon or watch Netflix now. The next thing you see, the personalized solutions based on what you watch or what you shop. You don't need to search anymore. That kind of anticipations of customers' needs will be here to stay. And as a design thinker, we need to adapt to that. What are we going to use?
And I'm curious, you know, now that you've gone through this journey, if you had to do it all over again, would you stick to the same career in life? Is there anything you would change in your kind of, I guess, growth journey?
Yeah. I mean, in the true spirit of design thinker, I would say I would do it again, but better.
So what would you do better? What would you change?
I would try to use design thinking to help young generation, the kids, earlier. Because if you get the concept to kids and they get it, the adults, the corporate, the organizations will be easier. It will be easier, and then we will learn to be better design thinker through the process of engaging with kids. That's my my reflections. I would do it again, and I would do it better in that way. But now with all the enhancement of AI, and I would say, you know, I would do it again, but better with the technology complement and support from AI and all the data tools that are available out there. So that's also another improvement.
Do you think though that because basically what you're saying is if you had to do it again, right, you would start younger.
Yes.
With younger people.
Yes.
Do you think there is ever a chance in the near future that the Vietnamese government and the Ministry of Education would want to implement design thinking for young people at the school level?
Oh, that would be a dream come true.
Mm.
It would be a dream come true to get an invitation from the Ministry of Education and Training and say, come work with us, collaborate with us, help
Build a
us
curriculum and
build curriculum and apply it and help us roll it out and try with some schools and make Vietnamese generations, young generations, to be better innovators. So to make and bring design thinking skills or problem solving skills or innovation skills to every schools in Vietnam and to make it as essential as maths or English. That would be a dream come true, Cedric.
I think so. I mean, in my view, you know, you're right. I think Vietnamese education is already very strong, and they're very strong in, you know, STEM, STEAM, and so on, mathematics. But I think one of the areas that we've seen over the last few years is that many employers, once a graduate graduates from university, is that oftentimes they lack critical thinking skills, initiative, and things like that. So why not? Why not be able to not just wait until university, but at a young age, high school, maybe kindergarten, I don't know, but at least from sometime in secondary school, kids already are exposed to those skills and ways of thinking, which hopefully can benefit Vietnam and the Vietnamese economy in the long term.
Absolutely, I agree, absolutely. And there's a lot of ways design thinking can be manifest into life. The way you live, the way you work, the way you study, the way you play, you know, there's a lot of opportunities to apply there. And as the young learners, if they grab the concept, they understand it, and they apply to make things better around them, I think it's very powerful and impactful. Yeah.
And do you see a difference today in the kind of younger generation versus the older generation in terms of how they think, in terms of how they go about solving problems or how they go about, you know, tackling things?
Sure.
Do you see a big difference? And I guess what are those differences to you?
I think there's a lot of differences, but also there's some similarities. There's something that remain true, and the things that remain true is the self-improvement, the lifelong learning design, to learn and to improve yourself, educations. The needs for the great education is here to stay. In the past, now in the future, I believe is still the same for across generations. But the way the young generations learn, gather information, make decisions, nowadays are more, I would say, more efficient and more fastened, thanks to all the available technology and network, you know, internet of data or internet of behaviors, if you want to call it that way. So there's a lot of available resources to tap into, to learn. There's a lot of micro-learning among all the young generations. You can learn through just scrolling down on Instagram or
YouTube
whatever, or LinkedIn or whatever. In the past, we didn't have that opportunity. So we have to learn from textbooks, we have to learn from readings, we have to learn from the teachers or talking to study groups and all that. So there's a huge advantage of that. But as you mentioned, the critical thinking, the creative thinking needs to be there for a young generation. They need to understand what they're exposed to, what they read, and they need to understand to choose the right information to take on board for them, to equip them. So that, I think that's a major differences between generations in terms of the way they learn, the information they're exposed to. Yeah.
And how do you think, for example, because you have a son, right, Finn?
Yeah.
How do you think his future is going to look like in terms of, because, you know, we do all of these things, we try to build human-centered solutions, we try to solve problems in ways that will hopefully benefit humanity. As a mother, are you worried about the future? Are you excited about it? What do you think, you know, what does the future hold for Finn as he grows up?
It's a big, huge questions, but also a very exciting questions. I do believe we live in a very exciting era. Depends on how you look at it, depends on your mindset. And the future for young generation, my son 6 years old, and by the time he's 18, who knows what the kind of world is gonna be?
True, 12 years is a lot.
We don't know. But it actually, when he was 2 years old, he was chasing the robot at home. We don't have a pet, but he's chasing the vacuum robot. I was thinking, what's the future gonna be like? And nowadays, 4 or 5 years forward, and now we have a robot talking to you, do all the chores at home, you know, and all of that. And AI is developed with a lightning speed, and I think the future is unknown. I don't like to forecast or predict the future. Nobody can, but it's very unknown. But I would say each of us need to be prepared for it, and don't be afraid of the future, unknown future, but be excited. And if you prepare. You prepare for it, you be excited for it, you're ready for whatever comes your way. And I like to teach my son with problem solving skill, critical thinking skill, and collaborative skills, social persons, and develop his high EQ and expose himself with diverse scenarios and let him be the problem solver. I think the young generations should reflect and think of how to build the skills that here to stay for the future, which is creative thinking, decision making, emotional intelligence, and strategic problem framing and solving skills. And all of that can be enhanced by design thinking.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Collaborative skill as well. Yes.
Okay. And then for the future of Doodle, then, do you have now plans? Because now it seems that you're very pro going younger and younger. Yeah. Is that something now that you're thinking more seriously about in terms of your target audience, or do you still think that the future for Doodle is more focused on corporate?
I think our current conversation is extremely inspiring, and you ask a lot of open questions for the future, a lot of reflective questions, and I think the more I talk with you about it and the more I think about it, it makes sense. It does make sense to bring this framework, this mindset, its method to young generations and for the future. If you create a responsible, sustainable, impact-focused generations, then the world will be a better place for the future.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully
That's
for a better
yes.
place.
Okay.
Yeah. So it makes sense to do that, but I also anticipate that it's going to be a huge challenge, and it will be a collaborations between the system, educational systems, the content provider, the tools provider like ULab or Doodle, or parents' mindset, readiness, and all that will come together. So it will be a journey if we decided to get into the young learners design thinking training or education, but that's something that's very exciting to think about.
Okay.
That's for sure.
New business plan, business model.
Let's do that together. Let's have more happy hour time and swap ideas. Yeah.
And I think let's kind of now we zoomed in a lot. Let's zoom out a little bit. I guess, what do you think does the future of Vietnam look like? And what I mean by that is, over the last 10, 20 years, Vietnam has grown very quickly.
Yes.
The economy has been booming, averaged, 5 to 10% annual growth every year. I don't know what the exact numbers are. We can always look them up.
Sure.
What do you think needs to happen for Vietnam to really be successful? And what do you think along its journey are the things that could prevent that? Specifically from a design thinking, human approach perspective.
Well, I think as you mentioned, Vietnam is the spotlight of the world, and we are in the growth zone. And we definitely attract and draw a lot of investment and attention from the global economy. We're part of the global economy now, and we're very integrated as well. So there will be more demand as a country in terms of the systems, the policies, the people readiness, the skills, the workforce readiness. So definitely, I would say to welcome the opportunities, I'm not comment on any government policy and system, but
Sure.
I'm talking from the workforce point of view.
Sure.
Are we ready, right, to be the players of the global economy? Are we ready to think aligned? Yeah, to be more proactive, to be ready, and to add the values to the global economy. So in terms of workforce mindset and skill set, there are a lot more to do there.
Okay.
And we already doing our part in sectors like finance, banking, fintech, and retail, and real estate, and educations. But on a larger scales like manufacturing, or textiles or whatever, or high tech.
Yes.
High tech especially. We work with in a different kind of framework. What skills you need to be prepared and ready to get that. So training definitely a high priority. I think we are making also a lot of steps to be more transparent in terms of the policy. So
Sure.
I feel like we are getting there. But I would say, and I would love to have more collaborations among all the private sectors, companies like us, and more dialogues with the government. Not between governments and big players like big companies, but more like companies like us. And we're also very close to the end consumers and customers, and we can also bridge the gap more. Players like education enablers, like tech point of view, from your point of view, content point of view for us. Can we be more collaborative with the government? Can we be more helpful? Like the idea you mentioned earlier, the Ministry of Education and Training, one day let's ask ULAP and Doodle come together and help create a content to help the future generations or even a young workforce. So we're ready for that. So more dialogues, more collaborations will be great as well. But also another point I want to make is for every country's problems, when you go through development, you go through growth, don't forget the impact of the environment, the sustainability. So be mindful, I would say, be mindful of that on the air, the oceans, the system and everything, the materials we use, and do not forget the impact to the world, to the planet.
Okay, so if I can kind of distill
Yes.
what you mentioned. So you think still a lot of areas to improve in terms of the workforce readiness, in terms of development. I would agree. I think a lot of people come to Vietnam still because they think it's a relatively cheap labor force. But I think I would agree with you that if Vietnam wants to really kind of exponentially go on kind of a nice trajectory, I think some of the soft skills area still needs improvement. I think technically Vietnam is good. Some areas, like you said, still need to be improved. I would agree with you that I think there needs to be more exchanges between kind of, let's call us small industry versus big industry.
SME, yeah.
And I would agree with you today. I think there's not many forums or areas for those discussions to be had. And then regarding pollution, I know that for me is a problem, and I know that a lot of other folks are also struggling with that. So I guess what's a human-centered approach to solving pollution in Vietnam, in your opinion?
Wow, that's wonderful. I mean, I wish to have more projects on that, on the environment, on the air pollutions. But if I were to take that approach and bring it forward, there'd be a lot of dialogues. There are a lot of interviewings with multi-stakeholders, from the citizens, from companies, from policies makers, the government bodies and all of that, for me to really understand where the problems really come from. Is it caused by massive production or a lot of movement on the street? or is it the people's problem? We, you know, the season's problem, and we're not that responsible, or is it the infrastructure problem, you know, or greens problem, or landscape problem? There's a lot of things we can understand more, identify more.
Yep.
That would be the step I would take, and there'll be for design thinker would be a lot of different workshops, a lot of collaborative sections together to really nail down to the true problems, to understand, the root cause problems, what is it, and especially from the human-centric side, what are the needs of the people, right? And then, and from there, you take it from there with the, what are the solutions, and of course, there'll be the roadmap, it's not a one-stop shop, what do you call it, one-time vaccines.
One solution,
It's not one vaccine, it's not overnight.
Yeah.
It's the whole journey. And sometimes we need to go back to the problem again to understand through the process. So to solve the air pollutions, I think start with dialogues, listening, understanding. That would be the first crucial step, I would say. I don't have solutions yet.
I would add another, maybe it's not me being a good moderator, but I would add on top of that is we can also potentially look at what other markets have done. Because I recall, you know, back in the day in China, they had a lot of problems of air pollution as well. But now if you go to Beijing, they've managed to not really reverse it, but they've significantly improved it. I think there was also lessons to be learned from some of our neighbors in terms of what are the best practices.
Yeah, hopefully we improve on that sense.
All right. So we're going to shift a little bit. So we're going to move a little bit away from design thinking now. And I think what I'd like to ask you, Niu, is a bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. What's it been like, you know, building something from nothing? Because I'm sure we'll have many folks interested in entrepreneurship listening in. Challenges, you know, tears, struggles, wins as well. This is important. Lessons learned.
I would love to hear from you. Actually, I think you're the expert
in
that.
You can interview me in your future podcast. You can interview me.
You're the expert in that. But in entrepreneurship, creating something from scratch, keep it alive, keep it grow, keep it alive, keep it grow. It's not for the faint-hearted, I don't think. I think you would agree with that. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of cheers, celebrations, small wins, big wins, but also there's a lot of tears as well.
Yes, so, for sure.
So it's I would say it's not for faint-hearted, but you can do it very much. You can do it, and if you have the right spirit for it, and the spirit of never give up. I love this quote from one of my mentors: never, never give up. And keep trying, improve yourself, and understand why and the purpose you're here on day one, and follow that compass as the, you know, as your North Star. Also, another thing I think as an entrepreneur is never think or act alone. Surrounded by yourself with a great, meaningful ecosystem, if you want to call it that way, or relationships. You know, partners like you, I'm thankfully to have, in our partnership network. Surrounded yourself with great partners who you can bounce back ideas, you know, validate insight or ideas or anything you want to develop, gain feedback, and support you to go through the journey. Then I would say be prepared and build a very good well-being. A well-being is not only about mental, spiritual, your strength, you know, exercise and all that, but also well-being also means struggle healthily. Because there'll be a lot of struggles. But how you get through it, how you train yourself to be strong and to be resilient and agile. That's the word I'm looking for, resilient and agile. Like a mountain goat.
Like a mountain goat,
like a mountain goat, and keep going.
Or a camel.
Yeah, exactly. Like keep going and believe that you can get there. Your goal is there, but how you get there may change along the way, and gather the support on you can, build yourself up, be resilient and agile, and put on a good fight, I would say.
And I think, you know, one of the things that are there's a misconception about entrepreneurship that I think everybody thinks they have to build $1 billion company. You don't need to build $1 billion company. I think being an entrepreneur, at least from my experience, but you're welcome to confirm or deny, is also about freedom and being able to make your own decisions, choose your own destiny. And so I guess for your entrepreneurial journey, what was the kind of vision for starting a company? Like why did you do it in the first place?
Sure. I mean, I totally agree with you in terms of freedom. Freedom is wealth. To me, like you mentioned, you don't need to build billionaires empire. You can still feel rich in that way, rich in your knowledge, rich in your experience, and rich in the impacts through the projects that you do, being rich in that way. But I mean, we started with my husband and I, my business partner as well. We started with a sole purpose, and there was actually we just had a sketch on a paper. We didn't have any, we doodle. And is at the heart of it is what problems we want to solve. And we realized, math, English, STEM and all that is so desirable. But how about create problem solving skills? How about innovation skills? And we have a mission to make it the skills for everybody. Everybody can be better innovator. And we want everybody to think that design is not just for designers, and design is not just for expensive investment, just for the specialists. You can be designer if you make an experience or things better in every day. A salesperson, customer experience, a marketing, a finance, compliance, all can be designer if you make things better. Sure. And we want to kind of build that awareness and to bring and advocate the excitement among people we work with, and that's our mission, and still stay true till now.
Lovely, very nice.
Yeah.
And I want to touch a bit on one of the points you mentioned, which is you work with your husband.
Yes.
Right? So I guess how's that? I don't know that maybe it's not common advice to work with your spouse or
no.
or a partner, so to speak. Yeah. But you guys have done it. Yeah. It seems to be working. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, we have our days up and downs. But as a team, I think we try to be a great team and we try to complement to each other. But if you look at running a business as a couple, together, there will be a lot of challenges. For example, if you have a disagreement in a normal situation between, for example, you, Cedric, and your business partner, your disagreement, they look at you as two business partners having disagreement. Sure. If you're a couple having disagreement, they look at you as a couple having disagreement.
It's true.
So there's a lot of challenges in the barriers and the mindset. So we have to keep educating or advocating a message that don't look at us as a couple, look at us as two individual business leaders. One is focusing on this function, and the other one focusing on these functions, and be open-minded. And we try to build a culture of a healthy debate culture, and the debate between leaders or debate among team as well. So there's a lot of psychology awareness and advocacy to do as a homework if the two couples work together. And also another one we want to be aligned is we don't talk at home on work sometimes. So if you need to work with either of us, work with either of us. Do not assign that conversation for us to take it home. Keep the conversation, communications line purely professional, purely clear in that front. So in short, there'll be more educations and messages to send out to set the pace and to build the foundation what it's like to work with a couple. So we try every day to help with that. But territory-wise, if you clearly, this is your area, this is my area, and this is where we can complement. If we clear on that, it comes in very strong, powerful complement, and this is why we're still here.
And do you have any other examples of, let's call them power couples that work together well in business?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different business partners, couples running a family business together, small business, but also big business, and recognized business. And they they are a role model, for us, and we observe them, and we can see that they respect each other's territory, don't step on each other. Another couples I also lucky to get to know is your parents.
Sure.
I think I see how they interact with each other. I have a chance to work with them before for a little bit. Both of us, Chris and I, work with them, and I think is still true advice for a couple is to respect each other areas, and this is your area and you have full autonomy to make decisions. This is my area, I have full autonomy to make decisions on this area, and make sure to use each other's wisdom and feedback to build and not to fall into internal assumption trap. Like, okay, this is what I think, but what about the other? So we just have to share ideas, bounce back ideas, have a healthy debate.
Okay. And I guess just to wrap up, a couple more questions, I think, before we wrap this up. I'm curious, do you have a long-term plan to continue staying in Vietnam? Is there a point in which Doodle goes global somewhere else? What does that future look like?
I think we are already somewhere else. In a way, one way or another. We don't need to have office in other countries, but our projects already set footprint somewhere else. So we do projects in Singapore, Malaysia as well. Chris especially do a lot of workshoppings and trainings with people everywhere. I mean everywhere in the world. Africa, US, Europe, Asia, Australia, and he's really enjoyed that training part. I mean, for us, regionally, we're quite close to Singapore and Malaysia. We do some projects there, here and there. We love to do more projects with the US and Japan and Korea. But for now, I think we're still here. Our leadership team is still here. But network-wise, we can tap to everywhere.
Okay.
Network-wise.
But home base, still Vietnam for now.
Still Vietnam, still love it. A lot of opportunities, a lot of optimism, and people like you still here, so I'm still here.
No, it's true. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So
I'm from here, so
that's true. Yeah, that's true. It's important.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Nhi, for joining our very first podcast on Skills Quotient.
Yeah.
I hope it was an interesting conversation for you as well. Just before we wrap up, my last question to you is if you can summarize for us in 3 or whatever, 1 bullet point, what do you want people to take away from today's conversation? What do you think is the most important thing?
Yeah, I think to wrap up, don't assume, talk, listen, understand, and don't be afraid to try and to fail and to improve and do it better and repeat the process.
Got it. So there you have it, folks. It's the human-centered design thinking approach, right? So yeah, thank you again very much, Nhi.
Thank you for having me.
Hopefully we'll have you on future podcasts as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I had fun.
Okay,
Thank you.
It's a wrap. Thank you.
Okay.